Warning coming from New Jersey Governor Chris Christie last night on 60 Minutes. So we asked, will the local budget crisis force the next federal bailout? Well, joining us now is Todd Schoenberger, Managing Director at Land Colt Trading, and Christian Dorsey of the Economic Policy Institute. And Christian, he is making some very valid points, and he's become a national figure because of it, that states and local governments are in fiscal trouble, and that could kill the bond market eventually, muni bond market.
Well, they certainly are in trouble, and the trouble is not going to recover at the same pace as the national recovery. States and localities particularly are going to lag behind a little bit more because, localities, deriving so much revenue from property taxes, which don't reflect the real-time decline in value in the housing market. So the trouble is on the horizon for a while. That said, I don't believe that we're in a municipal bond crisis at this moment. There are a lot of steps that can be taken between here and there to reverse what has been a momentary slide in the municipal bond market.
But if we don't see revenues increase at the local and state level, Todd, that could be a potential caveat for a federal bailout.
That's right, especially when you start looking at some of the vulnerable areas of the country. You think of a California, Nevada, Florida. Even a state like Texas is looking at a $25 billion hole right now. So when you start thinking about those municipalities and their issuers and what they're issuing right now, it's only going to be much more expensive for them to actually issue and try to borrow more of that debt. But further down the road, yes, you're going to see some defaults, obviously, only because of what Christian talked about when you start looking at the lag effect from property taxes, and let's not forget about payroll taxes with that high unemployment rate right now.
Because corporate America pays those taxes, those employees that work across this country pay taxes into it. If they're unemployed at 9.8% right now, nationally, Christian, they're not going to be paying in, and that revenue is going to be lost at the state level in particular. And that's, I think, what the Governor Christie was saying on 60 Minutes last night, is this is right around the corner. This is tomorrow, not next year.
Yeah, and there are a few things that could be done to shore up the municipal bond market. I mean, Congress failed to extend at least a version of the Build America Bonds program, one that I think was a fairly successful one in shoring up the bond market in 2009 and 2010. I mean, it reflected a quarter of all bond activity and was a much more efficient way than the traditional garden variety tax-exempt municipal bonds to allow states to fund infrastructure projects. I think Congress could do well to really shore up a potential hole in the muni bond market by extending at least a version of that program at some point next year.
But let me bring in Jim Awad into this from our market's perspective as well, and Todd can answer this as well, but because here's what's happening. If you get these deficits, if they're paying more for the debt at the state level, that cuts into their budgets. It's just a vicious circle that doesn't end.
And they have, in many cases, pension obligations that mathematically there's no way that they can pay, and that always doesn't show up in the numbers. But the one thing I would like to suggest, you can't let anybody significant default, because it's almost like what's going on in the euro. The entire municipal market will freeze up and it'll back into the economy. Don't you think we ought to have some sort of a task force in Washington that's looking at who the weak players are, and do sort of like a prepackaged restructuring, municipality by municipality, go in, the labor unions have to do so much, the bondholders have to do so much? Wouldn't that be intelligent?
Jim, do we need a task force to tell us tell us who's unemployed right now, and you look at housing values? I don't think I need to hire a task force to tell us that.
What I'm saying is maybe we could take a Wilbur Ross and give him the job of going in there and implementing it. I'm talking maybe it's a restructuring czar as opposed to a task force. I'm saying some proactive brains in Washington to come out and attack this problem before it occurs, rather than just leaving it to the markets, because one default is a default too many.
Yeah. You're absolutely right about that, Jim, and I have to agree with that. And if there is actually a couple of options here. I mean, when you start thinking about the pensions that are being paid out, and it's not just the pensions to the former state worker, it's also when they pass, it's also passed on to a survivor. There's a survivor's benefit, which can go on for decades and also crush budgets for these states. So really, why not offer maybe a state municipal bond to actually have some type of pension reform or something that's going to just maybe settle that, get them off the books, and then move on and try to do something like that. Because realistically, and Governor Christie's right, this is a problem that's going to continue for a long time, 10, maybe 15, 20 years, only because you have such a crushing housing value market, and also with the unemployment rate.
And Ashley Webster, I nominate Christian Dorsey for the job, by the way. But anyway, hold on, Christian.
Thank you.
Dorsey is the next bond czar. Christian, I just want to say, you know, we're hearing reports of local governments using the proceeds from these bonds to cover payroll and other basic projects other than the big projects it's supposed to. I mean, how concerning is that to you, and does that really point to an imminent disaster of some sort?
Well, I mean, that's part of what you get, Ashley, with, traditional tax-exempt munis. You get the opportunity to not only spend money on the huge capital projects that you'd expect, but states sometimes try to cover operations as well. That's why the Build America Bonds program, I believe, is much more efficient. And I can't believe it. And I'm the one who's not going to advocate for a nationwide one-size-fits-all approach. I think so many of the locality issues are so specific that any sort of a national attempt to, restructure is really going to fail. The circumstances are so unique that it requires a very specific local approach. But I do agree that significant restructuring is probably going to be in order for some of the municipalities that are looking at the worst of it.
Todd, last word to you. I mean, what is the phrase, only the strong will survive? I mean, maybe it's going to come down to this, like what Christian is saying. I mean, watch out, Texas and Arizona.
It does seem like that, and especially you can even look at a state like Illinois right now. I mean, they're paying out massive amounts right now just to borrow this money. And I think states really need to start to take a look at what some of these projects really are. I mean, you take a state like Maryland, for example. Years ago, they actually issued municipal bonds to build M&T Bank Stadium, which was actually sold to a corporate sponsor. So when you start thinking about some of the projects that are in place, I think states really need to take a look back and see if the economics really pay off.
Todd Schoenberger, Managing Director, Land Colt Trading, Christian Dorsey, Economic Policy. Guys, thank you so much. Have a great holiday, by the way.